millennial and a boomer?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with some of that. I think also too is I think there is a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money different ways right now.
Okay.
And when you are scrolling TikTok, Instagram, there's a lot of those, we'll call them gurus, whatever it is, showing that you can do this. And so I think what happens is we, millennials, they could have a great career, great job, but they're seeing their friends maybe go to a different level, their colleagues, family, and then they're getting on these platforms and seeing people living this life that maybe is real, maybe is not. And so they're like, what am I doing wrong? Right? Why can't I have that? Or why don't I have that? Or maybe they're trying their hand at 3 different things and they're not really progressing at any of them. And so you get in this, I feel like you get in this weird dynamic if you're just chasing something that doesn't necessarily matter as much, maybe. I don't know. It's a weird thing to think about. I think our parents too were just more humble and down to earth about like what their job was and what they were doing. And I think we're just more motivated to try to do more or have more, or things like that.
Yeah, I think you touched on something there. So like and it has a lot to do with expectations. So what were we told when we were growing up? So you get good grades, you graduate high school, then you go to college. And then once you come out of college, you are almost guaranteed a high paying or a decent paying job that would allow you to live the life that you lived when you were growing up. And I think the fact that is not people still expect that, but that is not reality now because things have changed so much. I think that's where a lot of us are kind of falling through the cracks. And not to mention 2 recessions, COVID, not to say that other generations haven't lived through those things, but we were in our formative years as adults when things happened. And for those at home, this is not a bitch session, me crapping on other generations. I just want to have a conversation about why this is happening. And so I'm not fingers in anyway, just FAQ. All right.
Well, I also think too is like everything seems or is in reality more expensive right now, right? Housing, food, airlines, all these things. And so when you want to keep doing all this stuff, you get in this, I guess, rabbit or this hole of chasing the rabbit or whatever that looks like. Like, I have to do this, so I have to make more money, or I have to figure out how to make more money. And so you're constantly just trying to do more because things cost more. You want to do more. Society shows you can do more, right? And so I just think it's like a awful snowball of things right now.
Yeah. I mean, we have delayed milestones too. I mean, like, again, our parents' generation was very typical to get married, settle down right away, have kids, buy a house, and live the American dream. And like, again, our generation, it's not like that. Most of my friends didn't get married until their 30s. Most of my friends didn't have their career paths until their 30s. So I just think there's a little bit of delayed satisfaction. And to like older generations, they kind of look at that as, there's instability, and it's not. It's just we have a totally different, dichotomy of growing up. And to your point earlier, Brad, about social media, that's the dichotomy that like you look around and everybody looks like they're so successful and living the best lives. And that creates a lot of, anxiety and depression, I think, amongst people because they think everybody's doing so well. So they think internally, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not, hitting these goals? But everybody puts on, the life of the rich and famous when they're on social media.
Ain't that the truth?
I mean, here's the thing, though. Let's think about this. The 3 of us, we're fortunate. We have really great careers. From the outside looking in, people would think we're perfect or we have it all, right? We're doing all these things. I mean, but you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes in everybody's life. So I think that's like the false narrative sometimes people see or they don't see.
Yeah, they don't see going broke and wondering how you're going to make your car payment next week. I've been there multiple times since I became an adult. And I almost think that it's kind of a rite of passage for a lot of folks. But staying in those spots, staying in that struggle, I think is dangerous for a lot of us because then we just sit there and lament and isolate because we don't want to go someplace and see our friends and ask how you were doing. and have to lie to them. But I don't know.
Like
So
we were talking about it yesterday. I was like, I have PTSD from credit cards. Like I got I was in college, they give you a Capital One card, and had a very low limit, and you max it out, and then all of a sudden, like, you don't understand interest and how that compounds, and then like, you graduate, and you have these crappy jobs, and like couldn't like just paying off interest, couldn't like pay off the principal, and like that thing followed me around for years, and so like to this day, like I don't do credit cards. Like after that experience, I'm good.
Yeah, I think most lessons not learned in pain or in tears or blood are easily forgotten. So we've all been there. So how does this relate to housing and millennials? So you see Gen X, which we're not talking about Gen X. We don't want to get those guys riled up. We talk about the boomers. So like, how does this equate to millennials getting themselves sorted so they can get caught up to those milestones that were expected of us and we kind of expect to ourselves? So how can we do that with housing?
Well, I think, again, I always think about, like, you got to have a clear path of what you want in your life. And I think there are still a lot of millennials that are bouncing around job to job, state to state, career to career, and trying to figure it out. So I think the first thing any millennial needs to do is just like, is this what I want for the, not necessarily long term, but next, 3 to 7 years. And if that's the case, then, they kind of have to stop doing all the stupid stuff with their spending their money and save it. Right? Like, I've talked to clients that I have a client right now. We've been searching for a house for 3 years, and she kind of refuses to play the game, but she also refuses to like save money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so she's probably had the same amount of savings for the last 3 years, hasn't probably gone up or down, but interest rates have gone up, prices have gone up. And so she's like, I can't buy a house. Well, you travel all the time. I see on your Instagram, you buy all this stuff. Like, you're not willing to make the sacrifice to do that. So I think it's, what's that?
Curious, Brad, is she single?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like we were touching on earlier, that there's less two income households in your 20s, and so that makes it a very hard, to support a mortgage when you're just a single guy, single girl, and working a job. And like for me, I didn't get married until I was in my 30s, and that's when I bought my first house, because I had stability with 2 incomes with my wife.
Yeah, there's a study done. My God, Lord, I don't even remember when it was, but they studied people who had college degrees, and then folks who did not have college degrees but were multiple income households. And surprisingly, the folks who were better educated but were single were worse off financially than those who were less educated and had dual income. So I mean, if you're looking for a hack when you go to buy real estate or trying to up your life, get married, and make sure it's the right person. Don't just get married to get married. It's funny that I say that because when you asked if she was single, I was going to interrupt and said, "Are you inquiring?"
Yeah, I was about to prep. I knew I was going to come up.
Yeah. Oliver is a taken man, guy.
Happily married. Yes, thank you.
I think my point around that was, this particular person, like, the way she wants to live her life is she doesn't really care to date. She doesn't want kids. Like, she is a career woman, but she is unwilling to do or sacrifice other things in her life in order to achieve the goal of home ownership. Yeah. And so, like, our parents, think about when our parents were going to buy a house. I mean, when I talk to my parents, they live with their parents. They save for 2 years. Like, they sacrifice all these little things in order for them to be able to scrape enough money together, back in the 80s to buy a home. So I just think it's a mindset thing as well.
I agree. And it is hard to save. I heard this some time ago that millennials are not necessarily paycheck to paycheck. They are dog surgery to car repairmen. That's kind of how they live their life. And as soon as one of those things happens, they kind of have to hit the reset on their savings, start all over.
I can attest to that back in the day, for sure.
Now, yeah.
Yeah. My other home buying tip is don't get a pet too early. These things are, they're super expensive. You're tens of thousands of dollars. So if you're out there looking for, buy a home for the first time, get the dog after. Do not get the dog first.
Yeah, and drive the used Honda, not the G Wagon.
Yeah. So there's this article on HuffPost, and take them for what you want, but it's actually a pretty interesting article. But it talks about millennials, home ownership, finances, those kind of things. So I'll make sure to drop it in the show notes. But one of the things that I just showed up in this article as I'm scrolling is with zoning, and I know we've touched on this a bunch of different times, but basically, cities are zoning specifically for McMansions. And I know, Brad, this is in your backyard because New Albany is not willing to relent on spacing between houses. So are millennials getting stuck by new builds being so much higher priced because of zoning restrictions, and they won't allow density to come into the equation?
Was that a question?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, do you see this changing anytime soon for the betterment of millennials because they just can't afford those McMansions as their first house?
I mean, I don't know if you're going to see a lot of change. I think you're going to see stuff like we talked about last week, maybe those, those module type homes, tiny homes, smaller homes being built. I think maybe you'll start to see that, but I just don't think that you are going to see, quote unquote McMansions slow down anytime soon, because there's still a ton of people that can afford these houses, right? Especially if they're dual income and they both have great jobs. So I don't foresee this changing really. I think it's just going to get worse, and then there'll be some sort of sector where they'll have new things come out to try to help this. But yeah, in my opinion, I don't think it's slowing down.
You ever looked at like houses in Texas?
Mm-mm.
They're freaking huge.
Like the middle of Texas.
Yeah, middle of Texas. Like if you're in Dallas, and this high density, like there's not much space between you and your neighbors, but they are McMansions. So they're like mansions stacked on top of each other, but they're actually
really
pretty. I mean, it's incredible. Like I look at housing in Texas, I'm like, oh my God. Everything's bigger in Texas.
There's a group. It's called Nava Realty. If you look them up on YouTube, and all they do is like new home tours, and where they're at, these houses are 6,000 square feet for $350,000.
Really?
Yes.
Now, again, you gotta preface this, like they're not in areas where there's like high density, a lot to do. They're just kind of like Oliver said, like out in the middle of nowhere. But people who want to afford housing and they don't mind that, they're going out there and they're getting these beautiful homes for $350,000 to $450,000 that in Dallas are probably $2-3 million easily.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if that'll ever happen here, but it is an interesting thought, I guess.
I mean, we don't have the space as much space as Texas, but we do have some sprawl that's happening. And people, I mean, Oliver, you and I were talking about this yesterday. You got out of Short North because of what's going on down there. So you can have more space for the family that you're raising. And actually, you know what? We're just going to take that as our cue to segment to the next topic. So, Oliver, you said that you live down in the Short North, right?
Yeah, I moved down to Short North 2011. So I was about 3 years out of college and lived there for almost 7 years.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and run with this? What are you seeing down in the Short North when you go back to visit?
Yeah, I don't recognize it. Every landmark, everything that I used to walk by in the Short North is not there anymore. And it's not for a bad reason. I mean, it's been incredible growth down there. It is the heart of our city. And I loved living down there. I loved their just kind of urban vibe that the Short North gave off. And it's also for many people is the very first experience. When you come to Columbus, you're usually, when you're visiting, you're coming to a conference downtown, you're staying in a hotel downtown, you're visiting friends. And your first experience of Columbus is in the Short North. And most of the time, it's very positive experiences, because when I hear about people who are coming here to visit, they love Columbus. And I'm like, well, where did you go? And they're like, well, we were down in the Short North. And they don't really get outside of that bubble, but it has so much energy, and there's so many good places to eat and walk and shop. So I think just culturally, there's a study, this article, and they were talking about 80% of people see the Short North as, it is Columbus. It's what our brand is as people who live in Columbus.
So I heard a lot of positives there, but are there any negatives?
Yes, because that growth had brought other challenges, and there's a lot of crime now that's happens in the Short North, and it's a big nightlife district. It draws a lot of people who come downtown and have a good time. And when I lived there, there wasn't much crime because then there was nightlife. And that's why we like to live down there. But it pales in comparison to what's down there today. And walking around, at 2 a.m. after the bars closed and things, like you didn't really feel, that there was an unsafe area. Post COVID, we've had a lot of unfortunate crimes and shootings that have happened in the short north, and those headlines have scared people away in the suburbs from maybe visiting and going downtown. And that's not the only reason. I think this article talks about suburbanites not wanting to visit. I think other reasons are, we were talking about this off air, Ryan, but there's other main streets, I call them, in Columbus. If you're in Dublin, you've got Bridge Park. If you're in Hilliard, there's like Old Hilliard. So there's just other areas for people to have a little bit of nightlife, but they're family oriented. These are not singles looking to go out and have a good time. These are, you're not bringing your kids down to the short north. So that's just my 2 cents.
What are you going to say, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't live in the short north, but I've lived in the city, prior to moving to the suburbs, and everything Oliver said is completely true. I think kind of the big things that I've seen change kind of COVID and post COVID is the lack of, I'm going to say, policing. And what I mean by that is, during the evening time when people are out, you can go down there and it's tons of four-wheelers and dirt bikes and motorcycles ripping up and down High Street.
Really?
And it's not that like people necessarily feel unsafe about that. It's annoying, right?
Loud.
And it's loud. I mean, think about when you're wanting to sit outside to have dinner, or you're walking with your significant other or friends down the street. Like, you don't want to hear the tailpipes of 50, ATVs ripping down High Street. And I think the thing is, and this isn't a political statement, this is just a statement, is, for a long time, nothing was being done about this. They weren't, there was no police down there, or they were not doing things. And then you had also kind of, like Oliver said, when he was down there, there wasn't some of these quote unquote like nightclubs that there were for a while. That brings a whole nother, kind of crew of people later at night. And then you get things like this have happened, like the shootings and stabbings and things like that. And so I just think that the city itself has taken something that was so precious and kind of, they turned their back on it for a while, and it made it unsafe for a lot of people to go to. A lot of people decide they didn't want to do that. And you also see like the vacancies that are happening with the store. So I hope it gets turned around. But like, for me personally, we don't go down there for all those reasons. We just don't go. I'll go down during the day or on the weekend and walk around, but not in the evenings. We just go other places.
Yeah. But it's, I think there was talk about just like 10% vacancy right now, and that's 5 to 7% is normal. Right at 10%, that's the cutoff of being healthy, and anything above that starts to get a little bit unhealthy. And I don't think there's real trouble in the future for the short north. It's going to do just fine. Also heard guys like DraftKings has taken over Melt. That's going to be really cool. That might get me to come down there, having that sports book and sports bar downtown. But the identity of Columbus, though, and I think it's great, though, is we have that convention center that's right downtown. And I just think that's always going to feed the short north, because we're not tourists, but there's people who come here, to come to these big conventions that we're hosting, like the Arnold. And I think the short north is just, their bread and butter is still, it's dining. It's the dining experience. And so there's a lot of great restaurants that are down there, and that's always going to, carry the short north. But I think what people, it's an arts district. And so the other thing is like, gallery hop used to be a big thing. It's the first Saturday of, every month. People go around and, visit all the art galleries that are down there. And I haven't been down there in years. But I was reading that article, and it seems that it's kind of lost its luster, and they've got to revive that. But again, it was a big part of the short north identity was the arts district. And that's kind of getting split up by this life and more dining, and there's a lot of hotels that are down there, and that also feeds into it. So yeah, it's evolving, it's changing.
Oliver, I have a question for you. Do you think that if we did not have the convention center traffic and events, do you think the short north would be more in trouble now than, I'm not saying it's in trouble, do you think it would be more in trouble, and some of these things, some of the vacancies being lower or higher, I should say, people not going down there? Because when the people from the conventions are coming in, they don't know any better. Right. Like they don't read on things like we do. They don't have these conversations. So I'm just curious, do you think it would be a little bit less desirable?
Yeah, 1,000%. When you come in for conventions, I don't know about you guys, but every time I go to a convention, like I also like to go have fun because you're in a new city, you get to experience new things, you're around other people in your industry, and you're going out to dinner, having drinks, and staying in cool hotels. And that's what the short north is all about. And I think about the study you mentioned. There's about 25% of the consumer traffic are people from out of town, and that's why they're there. So we don't want to lose that. And I think anything that they can do to promote, again, I think the hotels are actually a great thing for the short north. The Meridian's like beautiful. The Moxie Hotel is really cool. You've got the Graduates. You got these like really cool boutique style hotels that are down there, and it attracts people from out of town, and it feeds into all the businesses that operate in the short north.
Well, okay, so it sounds like it used to have this identity of being family friendly, something to do, but it's kind of morphed into, I think one of you guys mentioned it, like kind of like a nightlife, like the Arena District, where there's Brothers, there's Gasworks, or hell, I don't even know if those places exist anymore. But it used to be the bars that the young folks would go to and frequent those areas. But it kind of sounds like that's what the short north is turning into. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, in my personal opinion, and again, I could be way off with this, but I think the short north is dominated more now by younger people than maybe in the past, right? Like I think, that 22 to 26-year-old crowd makes up a lot of what's going on in the short north. And I think the people, some of the legacy people that live down there that are maybe in their 40s now, I'm not saying they're not going out to have a nice dinner, but like Oliver said, there's more options now. And so, if some of those people don't feel like dealing with young kids and all the, shenanigans that goes on with that, they feel unsafe, they are willing to now travel to these other places that have become destinations that weren't available to them, let's say 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so I just think the demographics a little bit different right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brad. It's a much younger demographic. And I don't think it's for a bad thing, but it's going to push people away like us. Like we're not going to go down, party with college kids anymore. So we don't have much reason to go down there other than go out to dinner. But again, we have so many good options now in the suburbs. People live in their bubbles and they don't leave.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think some of the stores too, some of the clothing stores, these boutiques, they're not like cheap places to get clothes. So like, are these 20-some-year-olds buying that? How are they supporting that? Right. Like, and I used to love going down there and going to some of, like Artisan Deluxe was like a place I go get jeans all the time.
Uh-huh.
And I loved going in there, but like, I'm not going to go down there now because I don't feel like dealing with the short north at the moment.
So here's my solution. We get rid of the short north. That fixes our housing problem because people can then afford to buy houses because they can save money now.
There you go.
So problem solved. You're welcome.
It's true though. Like when I lived down there, like I was like paycheck to paycheck just about because it was like there was so much to do down there. And I spent all my money on the weekends in the short north, and then I had to go make money again to do it all over again.
Yeah, I bet your broker really appreciated about that where you lived.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, gentlemen, you guys have anything else that you want to add before we wrap for this week?
I mean, it's not necessarily short north, I guess related, but it's been a beautiful week. I feel like the sun's out, like it's springtime. It's, it's feels good. I'm glad maybe we're past this winter gray and off to a strong start this spring.
Yep.
Yeah. It's, this weekend with just a little bit of warm weather, it will be pretty vibrant down the short north. I know people are going to be getting out, and it's just nice that the weather's finally changing. So just looking forward to getting out this weekend.
So one thing that I wanted to add, so everyone was kind of banking on interest rates coming down this week, but we got new job numbers that were released from the Fed, and it showed job growth. I'm sure that you guys already know this, but the job numbers that we did get, they're a farce. So they're basically taking in consideration seasonal jobs. So those temp jobs, like Walmart's hiring more people just for 2 months, it takes into consideration those. Not to mention, we added 20,000 more government jobs, which I don't think those should be counted in the numbers at all. So what we can expect from interest rates probably over the next week or so is rates will come back down, probably in Q2, early Q2, late Q1, when the new job numbers get released and they can't hide behind these fake artificial numbers. So rates are up this week, but I fully expect them to come down in the coming weeks. So just stay tuned. We're going to get into the sixes and stay there for most of this year. And God help us, we survive this election cycle and move on to something else. Yeah. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, thank you guys as always. Appreciate both of you. If you guys are joining us, once again, happy to have you guys join us in the chat for the next one. Yeah, let us know what you guys want us to talk about.
All right, guys, have a good weekend.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks.